It wasn't just a renovation. It was a magic trick performed under the nose of the deadliest police force in history. How did the Third Reich, a machine that conquered Europe with tanks and terror, lose a tactical game of hide-and-seek to a 50-year-old spinster in a narrow Dutch house? The Gestapo had the dogs. They had the radar. They had the lists. They claimed that nothing in the Netherlands could vanish without their permission. But they were wrong. While their panzers rolled through the streets, a quiet war was being fought in a bedroom, mere inches from where the soldiers walked. They were looking for a fortress. They were looking for an army. So they completely ignored the woman standing behind the counter of a dusty watch shop. They dismissed Corrie ten Boom because she looked harmless. They thought she was just fixing clocks. But while they were counting minutes, she was building a paradox. Why did the most efficient hunters in the world fail to see what was right in front of their eyes? The answer wasn't on a map. It was hidden behind a wall that technically didn't exist. Haarlem, the Netherlands, 1940. The occupation does not begin with a scream, but with a suffocating order. The smell of tulips is replaced by the exhaust of gray trucks. The Dutch sky, once open and free, is now crisscrossed by the Luftwaffe. In the center of the city stands the Ten Boom watch shop. It is a place of precision. Gears, springs, pendulums. For decades, the family has lived by the rhythm of the tick-tock, ensuring that every second is accounted for. But outside the glass windows, time is breaking. Corrie is not a soldier. She is a woman of faith, approaching middle age, living with her father and sister. In the eyes of the occupiers, she is a non-combatant, irrelevant. But the Nazi system has a flaw. It assumes that power only comes from weapons. The terror begins slowly. A neighbor disappears. A star appears on a coat. The system begins to tighten its grip, demanding the deportation of the Jews. It is a bureaucratic machine designed to process human beings like cargo. Corrie watches. She sees the fear in the eyes of her neighbors. And in that moment, the watchmaker decides to stop observing time and start stealing it. The decision is not dramatic. There is no swelling music, just a knock on the door in the middle of a rainy night. A woman stands there, shivering, clutching a suitcase. She has nowhere to go. The official law says, turn her in. The human spirit says, open the door. Corrie opens the door. But kindness is dangerous. A house is not a bunker. The Ten Boom residence is a beige, a tall, narrow row house. The walls are thin. The floors creak. It is a terrible place to hide a secret. If they are to survive, they need more than courage. They need engineering. They need a ghost room. A member of the Dutch resistance, an architect, arrives in secret. He looks at Corrie's bedroom on the top floor. He taps the walls. He measures the angles. He explains the mechanics of the deception. It is a matter of perspective. If they build a false brick wall about 30 inches from the real back wall, they can create a crawl space, a sliver of nothingness. But the physics of the lie must be perfect. If the new wall looks too fresh, the Gestapo will notice the mortar. If the room looks too short, the soldiers will notice the dimensions. If the wood sounds hollow when struck with a rifle butt, everyone dies. So they begin to build. They carry bricks up the winding stairs, wrapped in newspaper to dampen the clinking sound. They mix mortar in small batches to hide the smell of wet dust. They are constructing a trap for themselves, inside their own home. While the Nazis parade in the square below, singing songs of victory, Corrie is upstairs, aging the wood of the new shelves to make them look 100 years old. The architect installs a small ventilation grate hidden near the floorboards. It is the only lung for the 6 people who will eventually squeeze into that dark gap. The arrogance of the occupier is their greatest weapon. The local German commander believes that his control is absolute. He walks past the watch shop every day, checking his pristine uniform in the reflection of the window, never suspecting that the woman polishing the glass is essentially running a transit station for the condemned. He underestimates the Doge beige. He underestimates the brick. And most fatally, he underestimates the patience of a woman who has spent her life fixing broken things. The wall is finished. It is invisible, a masterpiece of deception. But a wall cannot stop sound, and a wall cannot stop betrayal. As the months drag on, the shop becomes a hub. The underground flows through the dining room. They develop a warning system, and triangular sign in the window, an advertisement for Alpina watches. If the sign is in the window, it is safe. If the sign is gone, the wolves are inside. The tension becomes a physical weight. Every car backfiring sounds like a gunshot. Every glance from a stranger feels like an interrogation. Corrie drills the refugees. They practice the protocol of disappearance. The alarm sounds. Currently, it takes them 4 minutes to get 6 people, their bedding and their trash behind the wall. Too slow, Corrie whispers, checking her watch. Her face is pale. If they break down the door, we have 90 seconds, not 4 minutes. They try again. The elderly struggle to climb. The breathing is too loud. The panic in the small room is palpable. They are fighting physics. They are fighting panic. And they are running out of luck because the system is not sleeping. The Gestapo has noticed that the ration cards in Harlem don't match the population count. The math doesn't add up. The hunters are getting closer. They don't know who is lying. They just know that someone is. And on a cold February morning, a man enters the shop. He is not a soldier. He looks like a friend. He asks for help. He asks for money to save his wife. Corrie looks at him. Her instinct hesitates. But her heart, the engine that has driven this entire operation, cannot refuse a plea for help. She doesn't know it yet, but she has just made the mistake that the system has been waiting for. It's tough to button. It was a trap. The man who asked for money was not a desperate husband. He was a collaborator, a cog in the machine designed to grind human trust into dust. February 28th, 1944. The raid does not begin with a siren. It begins with the mundane chime of the shop bell, followed immediately by the sound of boots that do not care about the floorboards. The Gestapo. Upstairs, the warning buzzer screams. It is a harsh electric rattle that cuts through the flu-ridden haze in Corrie's head. She is sick, her body burning with fever, but instinct is faster than biology. "The Jews!" she gasps. "Quick!" This is the moment the protocol of disappearance was built for. But reality is messy. There is no cinematic precision here. It is a frantic, terrified scramble of limbs and cloth. 4 Jews and 2 resistance workers race for the bedroom. The physics of the hiding place are cruel. The opening is near the floor, a small hatch that requires the flexibility of a gymnast. Old women are shoved through. A man dives in, but the system is already at the bottom of the stairs. The heavy boots are thundering up, step by wooden step. Corrie sees the last shoe vanish into the darkness. She slams the sliding panel shut. She rearranges the bookshelf in front of it. But then, she freezes. The evidence, the behe, is full of ghosts. Not the people, but their traces. A half-eaten bowl of porridge on the table. A book left open on a chair. The warmth still radiating from the empty beds. The Gestapo are not fools. They are forensic hunters. If they touch the sheets and feel body heat, the game is over. Corrie frantically smooths the covers, praying the fever in her own hands will mask the warmth of the refugees. She throws herself into bed just as the door bursts open. A man in a trench coat stands there. He smells of leather and cold ambition. "Get up," he barks. The interrogation happens right there in the bedroom. They don't ask nicely. They strike her. The blow is sharp and professional, designed to disorient, not to kill. Not yet. "Where are they?" the officer demands. "Where are the Jews?" Corrie tastes blood. She looks at him with the vacant eyes of a simple spinster. "I don't know what you were talking about." The officer laughs. It is a dry, humorless sound. He knows she is lying. The whole house screams of life. There are extra ration cards in the drawer. There's a pile of Alpina watches that shouldn't be there. He knows they are close. He just can't see them. This drives him mad. The Nazi ideology is built on the concept of total control. If a Jew can disappear, then the master race is not all-seeing. It is a crack in their armor. He tears the room apart. He rips the clothes from the closet. He smashes the lamps. At one point, he stands directly in front of the bookshelf. He is inches away from the false wall. Inside the darkness, 6 people stop breathing. Behind that brick curtain, the reality is horrific. This is the black box of survival. The space is roughly 2.5 feet deep. It is not a room. It is a vertical coffin for 6 living bodies. There is no light. The ventilation is a single pipe the size of a coin. The air begins to sour immediately, turning hot and thick with carbon dioxide. One of the women, Mary, has asthma. Her lungs begin to wheeze, a high-pitched whistle in the utter silence. Inside the wall, a hand clamps over her mouth. It is a brutal act of love. If she coughs, they die. If she breathes too loud, they die. Outside, the officer pauses. He tilts his head. "I hear something," he mutters. He taps the wall. Thump. It sounds solid. The architect's trick, the double layer of brick, absorbs the sound. The officer frowns. He strikes it again with the butt of his pistol. Thump. Physics holds the line. The wall does not sound hollow. The officer curses. His arrogance blinds him. He believes that if his eyes can't see it, and his hands can't break it, it doesn't exist. He trusts the solidity of the brick more than the possibility of human ingenuity. He turns away. "Take them all," he orders. "The old man, the sisters, everyone." The Gestapo drags the Ten Boom family down the stairs. Casper, the father, is 84 years old. He walks with the dignity of a patriarch, even as they shove him toward the trucks. But the horror is just beginning. As the family is hauled away to prison, the house is not left empty. The Gestapo leaves guards behind. They call it the mouse trap. They sit in the living room, smoking cigarettes, waiting for other resistance members to knock on the door. The telephone rings. They answer it, pretending to be the family. They lure more people in, arresting them one by one. All the while, 6 people are rotting behind the wall upstairs. Hours turn into a day. a day turns into 2. The mousetrap works perfectly for the Nazis. But they make a fatal calculation error. They assume that because they have captured the shepherd, Corrie, the sheep, the refugees, will naturally panic and reveal themselves. They expect a noise, a scream, a surrender, but they underestimate the discipline of fear. Inside the wall, the conditions are medieval. There is no bathroom. They are standing in their own filth. The thirst becomes a physical torture. The air is so thin that matches won't light. They are hallucinating in the dark. Mary's asthma is getting worse. The sound of her wheezing is like a siren in the cramped space. But they do not knock. They do not surrender. The police guards downstairs are getting bored. They eat the food in the pantry. They play cards. They complain about the cold. They are sitting 10 feet below the greatest prize in Harlem, and they are too lazy to find it. General von Braun, the regional commander, scoffs at the report. "If there were Jews in that house," he reportedly says, "my men would have smelled them. The Dutch are not clever enough to outsmart the Third Reich." He treats the silence of the house as proof of his victory. But he had fatally underestimated his opponent. It wasn't an empty house. It was a testament to endurance. While he drank his schnapps, confident in his radar, 6 skeletons were holding their breath, defeating his entire army by simply refusing to exist. Finally, after 47 hours, the guards leave. They lock the door. The house is silent, truly silent. But the danger has now shifted. The lock is on the outside. The refugees are sealed in a tomb. If they climb out of the hiding place, they are trapped in a locked house in the middle of a city swarming with Nazis. Who will open the door? The answer comes from the most unlikely source. The police officer who had been guarding the house, a Dutchman named Rolf, working for the occupiers, returns. But Rolf is not who he seems. In a world where lines are drawn in blood, Rolf is walking on the edge of the razor. He works for the Nazis by day, but his conscience works for the resistance by night. He enters the empty shop. He climbs the stairs. He stands before the bookshelf. "It is safe," he whispers. The panel slides back. The smell that hits him is overwhelming. The 6 figures that crawl out are barely human. They are gray, shaking, covered in waste, blinded by the dim light of the overcast day. But they are alive. They stumble out of the black box, gasping for the cold, free air. They have beaten the Gestapo. They have beaten the hunger. They have beaten the wall. But for the Ten Boom family, the wall was just the beginning of the nightmare. While the refugees escape into the night, vanishing into the countryside to safety, Corrie and her sister Betsy are being processed into the belly of the beast. They are no longer citizens. They are numbers. Corrie is thrown into a cell in Scheveningen prison. She is alone. The fever is consuming her. She doesn't know if the Jews survived. She doesn't know if her father is alive. She only knows that the system has won. Or so it seems. Because Corrie Ten Boom carried something into that prison that the guards couldn't confiscate at the gate. A weapon more powerful than a Panzer tank. She carried a book, and she carried a stubborn, impossible belief that even in the deepest pit of hell, there is a reason to keep ticking. Benno Ravensbrück. It was not a prison. It was a factory where the product was ash. Here, the system was absolute. Names were replaced by numbers. Corrie became prisoner 38777. Her sister, Betsy, was 31661. The camp was designed to strip away humanity layer by layer. First the clothes, then the hair, then the hope. The guards believed that if they made the women look like animals, they would eventually act like them. But they didn't account for Barracks 28. It was a nightmare of overcrowding. 700 women stuffed into a space built for 200. The stench was a physical wall, and it was crawling with fleas. The fleas were everywhere, in the straw, in the clothes, on the skin. To the Nazi guards, this infestation was disgusting. They refused to step foot inside the barracks. And that was the miracle. The guards' arrogance, their obsession with purity, became their blind spot. Because they wouldn't enter the filth, Barracks 28 became the only place in Ravensbrück with freedom. In the back of that dark, flea-ridden room, Corrie held a small, forbidden Bible. She read aloud. They prayed. They sang. The guards thought the fleas were a plague. But in reality, the fleas were the soldiers of the resistance. The smallest, most despised creatures on earth had built a perimeter that the SS dared not cross. But the body has limits that the spirit does not. Betsy was dying. The cold and the starvation were carving her hollow. Yet, as her body failed, her vision sharpened. She spoke of a house, a recovery center for victims of the war. "We must tell them," she whispered, her voice thin as paper. "There is no pit so deep that he is not deeper still." She died on a concrete floor in December 1944. Corrie was dragged to the hospital to see her. She expected to see the twisted mask of agony she had seen on so many others. But when she looked at her sister, the lice were gone. The starvation lines had vanished. Betsy looked young, radiant. It was a final act of defiance against the ugliness of the camp. 2 weeks later, a clerk in the administration office made a mistake. Or perhaps he just blinked. Corrie was called to the front. She was handed a stamped paper. Release. She walked out the iron gates. She walked past the smoke of the crematoriums. She walked into the snow, free. Why? Because of a clerical error, a typo in the great machine. 1 week later, the mistake was corrected. The order came down to execute all women of Corrie's age group. They were all gassed. Corrie missed the chamber by 7 days. She traveled back to the Netherlands. She opened the house Betsy had dreamed of. She spent the next 30 years traveling the world, telling the story of the hiding place. But the real test came in 1947 in a church in Munich. After she spoke, a man came up to her. He was balding. He wore a gray overcoat. But Corrie recognized him instantly. He had been a guard at Ravensbrück, one of the cruelest. He stuck out his hand. "A fine message, Fräulein," he said. "How good it is to know that, as you say, all our sins are at the bottom of the sea." He didn't remember her, but she remembered him. The blood in her veins froze. The system stood before her, asking for forgiveness. Every instinct in her body screamed for justice. He had killed her sister. But Corrie ten Boom realized the final truth. If she kept the hatred, she was still in the prison. She lifted her hand. It felt like lifting a ton of lead, and she touched his. "I forgive you, brother," she said, and in that moment, the war finally ended. Today, we look at our own walls. We build them to keep people out, to hide our secrets, or to protect our comfort. But Corrie ten Boom showed us that the strongest walls aren't made of brick. They are made of faith, and they are built to keep humanity in. If you believe that stories like Corrie's deserve to be remembered, join our ranks by subscribing and liking this video. We have synthesized this narrative from reputable historical archives and verified sources. However, the fog of war often extends to the history books. If you spot any inaccuracies or have additional details to share, please correct us in the comments. We strive for the absolute truth, and your knowledge helps us get there. Thank you for keeping history alive.